It went from being, dozens or maybe in the low hundreds of people involved to thousands. We'd have peace marches down Jayhawk Boulevard and fill the boulevard for a long distance.
Oh, that Firebird's gonna have to refuel.
In the late 1960s, at KU and in Kansas City, the anti-war movement grew as the monthly quotas for selective service increased and deferments were curtailed.
They were drafting 40,000 people a month to go to Vietnam. So as a professor at KU, one of the issues was, would you flunk a male student who might then be drafted? It was something we had to think about very, very seriously.
Student protests in the spring of 1969 resulted in vandalism and suspensions. On October 15th, more than 3,000 gathered on campus as part of the national moratorium to end the war in Vietnam. Similar demonstrations occurred in Kansas City that day.
Me and another buddy of mine had signs that said the moratorium sucks, because we were still supporting our buddies, we were still sending care packages to Vietnam, and we didn't see the light.
Into 1969, 1970, when Nixon is expanding the war, and here we're fervently trying to stop it, and suddenly it's getting bigger, not smaller. And that really brought out mobs of people. This is just totally intolerable. And by 1970, it was such a massive thing that it actually did basically shut down KU.
It was the war, it was civil rights, of course it was the counterculture. People said this was like the Oregon Trail for hippies. Berkeley was the epitome of college radicalism. And I think as Lawrence and as KU got more radical with the counterculture, with the anti-war movement, with Black Power and so on, people began to call it Berkeley on the Draw.
On April 20th, 1970, someone set fire to the KU Student Union.
I remember just smelling smoke. What is this? So I ran up the hill, and sure enough, there was the Union on fire. So I went across the street, across the corner of 13th and Oread, just to watch it, and ran into the Dean of Men, Donald Alderson, and he and I stood there watching it and talking and trying to figure out what in the world could anyone think, how is this doing anyone any good?
The next day, Governor Docking put the city under a 3-day dawn till dusk curfew, and the National Guard patrolled the streets of Lawrence. That May, after the shootings at Kent State, Chancellor Chalmers let students vote to end the semester early. Tensions remained high into the summer.
By July, you have a town that's really on the verge of civil war, racial civil war. There are vigilantes in Lawrence. They've got their loaded gun racks. I quote one vigilante, I can't remember where I found this statement by him, that he said he had 300 volunteers to deal with what he called the in and hippie militants. I would have to say that many of the Black Power advocates also were armed at this time. So it was a very volatile and a very dangerous situation. And then in July, 2 men are shot to death by the police, both shot through the back of the head as they were running from the police.
Rick Dowdell, a 19-year-old black university student, was killed by Lawrence police on July 16th. During a protest in response to Dowdell's murder, Nick Rice, another university student, was also killed by a Lawrence police officer who shot into a crowd during a protest.
I think the hippies and the anti-war people were very sympathetic to the Black Power movement and very outraged by the killing of Dowdell.
While Black Power and even women's rights were intertwined with the anti-war movement, it wasn't until later that veterans became involved.
The standard tour of duty was 2 years, so by the early 70s, people were coming back, and the anger, the animosity of the veterans was huge. They'd seen it firsthand. They thought this war was unjust, terrible. Practically every veteran I met was anti-war, and quickly they formed their own organization, Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
I'm sorry to say it took me longer than it should have to realize that what I needed to do for my buddies was to get them the hell out of that place and do everything I could to educate the American people, exercise my responsibilities as a citizen by saying no.
I went to a march or a rally or something, and I heard John Musgrave talk. And you know, John is an extremely eloquent speaker. I turned against the war and started figuring things out and putting pieces together and participating with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
We were active on a number of fronts. We had chapters all over the country, and we had an at-large chapter in Vietnam. In fact, our largest membership was our Vietnam chapter. We were involved socially as much as we could be in every community that we had a chapter, because we felt that there was more than simply the war was our responsibility as veterans. That as veterans, we also had a responsibility to walk point on social issues.
We did marches and we did picketings and we carried signs. We made speeches. We talked in classrooms when possible. And we developed some fairly innovative protest techniques. We had these leaflets and we went downtown, and the leaflets were cutouts of little bombs. And we dropped them out of the window of a high parking lot, somewhere I think like about 10th and Grand. And the leaflet said, if this were a cluster bomb, you just blew your hand off. And on the back it said something like, stop the war and stop cluster bombs.
The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birthdays for the draft.
Tonight, for the first time in 27 years, the United States has again started a draft lottery. And the famous first pick tonight is September 14th, the first birthday that now is designated 001.
While the additions of veterans bolstered opposition to the war, draft lotteries meant some no longer had a stake in the movement.
The issue became, what was your lottery number? And if you had a number over about 200 or so, then you were pretty safe. But if you had a lower number, then you were not at all. You were more likely than ever to go. But I think once there were a lot of people that essentially had a get out of jail free card, it, you know, it takes some of the edge off it, depersonalizes it. Suddenly I'm not so involved anymore.
In the spring of 1972, the last major anti-war protests occurred at KU. Within a year, President Nixon withdrew combat troops from Vietnam. The end of the war, for the most part, meant the end of the anti-war movement.
I think it truly changed the attitude of the town, and I think the peace movement nationally changed the attitude of the country. Why did we eventually, it took a long time, but why did we eventually withdraw from Vietnam? We lost the war and we left. I have no doubt that it was just this great surge of animosity toward it.
We had to sell our message that the war was wrong and needed to be stopped. So we had to put together cohesive ways to win hearts and minds. And in winning their hearts and minds, we won our own.